myself.
All right, welcome to a belated start to the January session of the FMDiSC 2025 user group meeting. We have a little bit of a hiccup in the agendas. Jonathan Jeffrey was up first, but he is not here yet. So Fabrice Nordmann has graciously volunteered to step into the first time slot, and he is going to be talking about OData. This is, I'm not sure how much overlap, but a bit of a reprise of the session he did in Malmo, Sweden at EngageU. So, and I'll leave the rest to Fabrice to take it away. But if everyone could, I guess, Fabrice, I have a quick question for you, and that is that if people have questions, do you want them to hold them to the end, or should they just sort of
Oh,
chime in?
no, please interrupt.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if anyone has questions, let them fly, and take it away, Fabrice.
Okay, great. So let me find how to share my screen on Zoom. Why still? Seeing it. Yeah, that's it. So can you see my screen now?
Sure can.
Yes.
And now the wrong one, right? Is that correct? What do you see? Do you see my
Looks
We
like
actually
speakers.
see your current and next slide.
Yeah, that's the
So
opposite
just
of
click on the
Speaker.
little switch screen next to the X there.
Excuse me, can you repeat that?
Move your mouse to the right, see where your X is, just to the left of that. Click that button. Go
Yeah.
down a little bit.
Okay.
Oops, now we're seeing your desktop with a FileMaker OData demo file.
Okay. No, that would be this one.
So if you go back to Zoom, the screen where it could close your speaker notes screen, it will allow you to flip screens. That button
Oh, you
just to
mean
the
that?
left of the
Yeah, okay.
X.
Okay, sorry.
There it is.
That's
Click
here.
one more
Next.
to the left. That
Okay.
one, yes.
Okay.
There we go. We're good.
So I can't see you, so please interact and tell me if you have some comment or reaction during the presentation. So this is basically the presentation I made a couple of weeks ago in Malmö at Engage conference, and the title is Why OData Should Be the Thing. You're really don't want to miss that train on that boat. That's the expression in English, I think, I believe. Okay, so first, who I am. I was born quite a long time ago, and that's even more true now. Turned 50 just last week, and I founded One More Thing. And just because I'm asked often the question, fmcloud.fm, which is more famous in the US, it's just the hosting branch of One More Thing. So, but it's basically the same company. So next to the subject, really, what is OData? So if you look up at the internet, you'll see that it's the best way to rest, which was enough to convince me that that was my thing. And how you define OData is so it's an open data protocol. It's basically the set of practice to build and consume RESTful APIs. So, which means that with OData, you can build an API to your custom app. And on that hand, actually, you have really nothing to do because Claris did all the work for you. And you can use it, of course. Why don't you use it yet? I mean, maybe some of you do, of course. I'm assuming some don't. There are several reasons why it took me also some time, although I quickly was very interested in it, but it took me time to really dive into it. The first reason was that the first versions of the documentation was and were horrible. Now it's much better. It's just very much like all the other gateways documentation from Claris. It's very easy to read. So just please take the time to read it. It's really easy to use, and the documentation is very helpful. But it's true that the first versions were not really encouraging. And also, we've got to get used to the fact that Claris is now an agile company. It's not a waterfall anymore, which means that the first versions of OData was implementation was very limited, and now they're adding and adding features and catching up with the 401 standard of OData. And so it's really worth looking at what's new on every release of FileMaker, because every time there are new things, and also new issues sometimes. Just find one today. Um, so this is what important. Why is it so special? We have already, and we've had always had gateways to interact with FileMaker. We've had ODBC, we've had at some point we had XSLT, we had of course PHP API, and many ways to interact with and to open our databases to the world. But first, it's completely standard. It's the first time, and this is really, if you have one thing to remember from this presentation, is that OData is completely standard. Any web developer can use it without knowing anything about FileMaker. It actually doesn't have to know that your backend is FileMaker. You don't have to teach him what FileMaker concepts such as layouts or portals or things like that. It can work and interact with a FileMaker database without knowing even that it's a FileMaker database. So, which implies there is no dependency to a layout, as opposed to other gateways where, like, for instance, if we take ODBC, the response is dependent, it's shaped by what fields are placed on a certain layout. That's not the case with OData. The other thing is that it's completely transactional. OData, yes, it's a HTTP, and it's a protocol based on HTTP, and it's completely transactional, which means it succeeds or it fails, and you get a feedback for that, and that's very convenient. I think I don't have to explain. I think what's transaction and so on, or that would be a whole topic. As opposed to FileMaker data API, you can do everything with one call. Means you can authenticate and do the rest, just like you used to do, for instance, with the XML API. So it's ideal for webhooks. If we have time, I'll show you an example of integration with a webhook. And also, OData can alter the database schema. So you can add a table, you can create a field with OData. I'm not sure that this is the first things I would like to do with it, but it's also a possibility. If we do a little bit of comparison between Data API and OData, Data API has native query. It means it's a completely separate Node.js engine that really does not have to translate the queries into some FileMaker query language. So in theory, it's the most efficient way. OData has to translate the calls into FileMaker query, a bit like SQL plugins have to do. But frankly, I don't know if this is a measurable difference. So Data API works with tokens, which means you need two calls to authenticate. OData I said it already, single call using basic authentication. Data API depends on layouts and portals. OData uses only the relationship graph, which means table occurrences and relationships, but not the layouts and portals and things like that. Data API cannot alter the schema, OData can. Data API is not transactional, and OData is very much transactional. You can do transaction on multiple tables with multiple types of queries, and this we're going to take a look at batches. And Data API has a script step now. So you have a script step called execute FileMaker Data API, which happens, I mean, it's part of the Draco engine, which means it runs on the client. It's not a server-only feature. OData is not yet at this stage. So I think we've got to put some pressure on Claris engineers. So they come with it. But I'm pretty sure that this is going to happen. So if we compare now to ODBC, JDBC, of course, ODBC requires a connector. I mean, which is, by the way, now it's so easy. You can just enable it from the admin console. And your ODBC is not aware of the relationships. You can use SQL. OData has a different query language, which is typical from OData, and which is much more limited, we have to say, than SQL. So there are still limitations. So some of those limitations would still be a good reason to use ODBC, actually. And ODBC has loads of functions like, if you want to do operations on the data. OData has some, but not so many. For instance, you can't use aliases on the select part. You can use aliases on the where part of on the where clause of your query, but not on the select. Actually, it's OData can, but FileMaker current implementation can't. So now let's take a look at some examples. Do you have questions so far? No? Everyone understands my French English? Okay, let's try. So here I've just prepared a very simple database with I don't know, 10,000 records or so, random data, contact data. And I've prepared some queries. I'm just going to show you the script editor. And so first thing I loaded, so never do this in production, of course, but I just loaded the authentication into global variables, so I don't have to re-authenticate for all scripts. And now I'm just going to execute the scripts. They all look pretty much the same, and we'll go into details for some and the differences, right? So now what happens if I get to the current record? So for example, I'm selecting Stephen Webb here and get current record. So this is the URL I called. So I called the server with this part, which is always the same, FMI, because it's still FileMaker International. They're not yet aware that it's renamed Claris, but that's will change one day. /OData/v4. And then you talk to a certain file. This is the name of the file. This you will see all the time. And then for this specific query, I'm asking this contact table, the contacts table, and I'm asking just, you see, it's a very straightforward query. I'm just asking for a primary key. Okay, so I'm asking, give me the data for that field. And with those curl options, which means this is a get. So let's do it with the debugger. Here, I'm having this. These are the curl options, so it's always authentication basic. I'm asking for JSON. Interestingly, you can also ask for XML or HTML. I will give you some nice trick during this
Fabrice,
presentation.
can I jump in for a second? Because I'm
Of
sure
course,
some
please
people are
do.
already thinking this. They're like, wow, that looks cool. And some people may be frantically screen shooting this and stuff like that. Can you make this file available for download
Yes,
so
it will
people
be
can poke
available, and
around and check it out?
there is some great candy in it, so stay until the end. So, and then here is another header, which is prefer return equal minimal, which means basically don't send me back any data. I just need I don't need it because OData is transactional. So the only thing you need to know is whether your call was successful or not. And this you can get it from the HTTP answer, okay? The response. I will explain this a little bit better. And then this is just a get query. I'm just getting some data. So, and basically then I'm just pasting in the result and the dump here. So in real life, um, what I'm going to be interested is not really the data. I mean, in this case, of course, yes, it's the data because it's a get, right? So I want to have the data and it's returning the data. But what I really want to analyze is this, is the HTTP error code. 200 and is okay. This means the transaction went through, okay? There, it's a little bit more complex if you use a proxy server, but I don't want to be technical here. I just want to explain the principle. So first thing, get current record. And you see what's interesting here, I'm passing just a primary key. But as you know, there's no such a thing as a primary key field in FileMaker. You can't define if one of your fields to be a primary key. So later on in the presentation, I'll tell you a little bit more about that, how it works and how to greatly improve your database structures if you know how this works. Okay. So we'll come to this a little bit later. Now I'm getting a single field. So here is data. I was asking for the last name of the current record. And this is the answer this is the response I get. Value is parish. And here is what the query looks like. So I'm asking here, still table contacts, for this record of which I'm giving you the primary key, give me just this field, / last name. Okay? Very easy, convenient. Now get me the current row ID. The current row ID, which is the equivalent, I mean, is the OData standard vocabulary for which means in FileMaker language record ID, the internal record ID. So give me the record ID for this, still using the primary key. And here I'm using you see this is the parameter of my URL, and I'm using $select. And select means the same as in SQL. It's uh, I'm going to use some criteria, and now I have the syntax to say with this row ID. What I want is the row ID. Okay?
Fabrice,
Yes.
your result says 12, but you're on the 11th record. Is there an indexing issue?
It's the record ID, so probably I deleted sometime one record. So
Oh,
if I go here, which one was it? Was it anyway? I'll go to the third record here, Foster. I do that and have ID 4. But if I open my data viewer, I hope, and I just get record ID. I have 4. Okay, so this is the internal record ID of FileMaker. Same thing. Okay, it's not a record number, it's the record ID. Is that okay?
noted. Thank you.
Okay. Next example, I will create a record. So let's create a record, and you see I created some record. It must be at the end of my found set. I had already one, but I just created a record, and it returns to me all the fields, even the empty ones, and the options I passed were this one, right? So I just asked. So this time I was using not a get, of course, because I was sorry, using, where was this? Oh, sorry, it's here. Yeah, this one is the wrong field. That's the thing. Sorry, this one is, I will modify that. This is the wrong field. Okay, so this is my curl options. And here I'm not using the get method anymore. I'm using the post method. Okay, because I want to create a record. And I simply passed some data, which I passed as a variable. So I have to look at in the debugger mode just to see how I do this. So basically, I'm doing that. So now look at the, sorry, just going to look at the data variable, and I'm just passing some JSON with first name, last name, and that's it. Okay. And then insert from URL, and then, well, you saw the rest. Okay. So here again, I have the data, but here I think if I change that, no, that was not create record. Okay, look, this is with the full response. So look at the curl options. And now if I disable those lines and I use this one, which has an additional header with this prefer return equal minimal, then I'm just going to do the same thing and it creates the record still, but I don't have a result. I don't have the data as a result, right? Which means my HTTP error code is 204, which is fine. 200 means it's okay. It just has no content, which is exactly what I asked for. So before 21.1, it was very important to know this because the data was was limited by your license. So it was very important to minimize the amount of data pulled out from FileMaker Server. Since the latest release of FileMaker Server, it doesn't counter, except if you're on FileMaker Cloud. So you can, but still, I mean, it makes, of course, the amount of data transiting much smaller. So it's still a good practice, in my opinion. Now, delete a record. Deleting is something I like to do. It's very easy and clears up the place. That's it. So I don't think I have too much comment to make here. Just note that I'm using the delete method in this case. I don't, of course. I mean, it's really compliant. So now we are going to modify a record, or maybe let's first create one, like we did before. And now let's modify it. And here you see I'm using the patch method, which is again completely what a RESTful API should behave like. I mean, you could do it with post, but they really made it. I mean, OData is very clean and the implementation is very clean. If you want to modify your data, you should use patch. So this is basically same thing, sending a JSON object with the fields. Here again, the URL is this one. I'm talking to this record with some data, and this will modify the I modified the city. This is modified by OData. Okay. So these are some of the really very common queries. Now we want to do some more interesting stuff like batches. So with batches, if I look at what the script does here, batches are a way to have several operations in the same transaction. Okay, so you keep in mind that you're always talking to a single file. You can't talk to multiple files, even in a batch, but you can talk to any table occurrence of that file, including a table occurrence that comes from another file. With this, building a batch is not so easy. So take a look at this script. It's, I think, quite a good example of how to build it. So first, I'm defining here a batch ID, which can be anything basically. Okay, and then and the batch ID here, I'm adding here 2 dashes before that. Be careful, by the way, on the Mac. It took me a lot of time to understand that the Mac was replacing my double dash by a single long hyphen or whatever it's called. I don't know, but it took me time to understand why my batches were not working. That was one of the reasons. So, and here I'm clearing up data. And here is what I have to do. So content ID, I'm initializing this value to 0. I know I'm showing and you didn't see the effect of the batch yet, and I'm going to add some content, some, let's say, operation after operation. So first step, I'm defining data now. Data looks like that at this stage. Okay, so here it means I'm initializing a batch. And then for each operation, I have to have this content type. I have to have a sequential number. Okay, so initially I had this variable initialized to 0, and then here in the calculation I'm going to show you, I'm just adding here +1. So here, this is my content ID 1. Then I have to have my curl for this particular operation, which means in this case, I would like to create a record. I'm going to post to this table with this data. But before I have this data, I have to measure the length of the JSON object, right? So, and this has to be accurate. This is not so easy to do with FileMaker, to have your string and then measure its length. So I'm going to show you the calculation. Then next step, I'm going to add some operation to this transaction. Here's what my variable looks like now. So you remember we were here, and now I'm adding a second operation with the same batch ID. This time it's ID 2. It's a different operation. It's a modification in this case. And again, measuring the length of the JSON object with the data. Okay. And then in the end, very important, substitute car 13 by car 10. Sorry, first, before that, I have to end the batch. So now my batch has this that's ending tag. So you see it's the same as this one with 2 dashes at the end. Okay, and then after that I substitute all car 13 by car 10. And then my batch is ready. And then what I'm going to do here, I'm going to simply insert. And what it did, it created a record, it modified the record, and I think that's it all in this case. I could also delete some record and can do many things in the same batch. Okay? So that is basically it. So when you write those batches, what's very important is keep in mind you're only talking to a single file. You can do many calls to many tables. You can do several types of operations such as create, delete, modify, and you can't, unfortunately, perform scripts in those batches. Okay, this is one of the limitations of these batches. Okay, but basically this is the idea. You can also, if you go to the documentation, you'll see that you can have sub-batches which are called change sets. I never find myself in a situation where I needed to, but basically you can have sub-transactions. Okay, let's not go into detail now. So now I'm going to use a filter. So you remember I showed you earlier the select statement. By the way, the dollar sign is now not mandatory, it's optional, but I still think it's clearer to use it. So in this case, filter is more like what we know in SQL with where. So you can have criteria such as select. I'm going to select the contacts where first name equals John. Okay, and then what my script does, I'm just going to show you the the relationship graph. So basically, I'm storing the result here. I'm just going to GTRR just to go to the found set, to the found records. So here I have found 301 Johns in my total records. So let's find how many Carlas we have. For instance, that would be I don't know, but sorry, I think it's hard coded in the script, so it won't work like that. But okay, so filter, and it has its own syntax, but as you can see, it's very easy. So you have equal, of course, you can have a greater than, smaller than, and you can have functions in there, which is very interesting because you can do some calculation in this filter part. So filter name only, what was it already? Yes, okay. So here I wanted to combine the select, where I select the fields I want, and the where part, which is filter. Okay, so basically what I mean here is please give me the first name, the last name, and the ID. ID has to be double quoted like this. And I mean, ampersand means other parameter is the filter where first name equals John. Okay, and this is what I get. I get my response. I get for each record, I get the ID, first name, last name, ID, first name, last name. You will notice that OData will also return all these values as an array, of course, but it will also give you links to edit the record or to retrieve it, which is very convenient for a web developer. So now, if I take this link, of course, I would need some to authenticate, but from a web browser, I would be able to find this and to modify this record. Okay, so for a web developer, it's very easy to work with. Any questions?
So
No
Fabrice,
question.
you had mentioned that it's not possible to invoke a script, but way back in the day, you had your audit logging example where you basically had auto inner functions causing your audit logging routine to run. It seems like you could do something similar here where you just have like either a dummy field or maybe you could even make a table with its own call stack that you could call and say, hey, here's some data I just wrote, process this in some way via script. And
Yeah, actually, you can do you see here we will perform script. It's just that you can't have scripts in a batch. You can't say create this record then run the script, for instance, which you could do with XML. Okay,
okay.
but you can of course you can perform the script. Tony, I think you have a question. You raised your hand.
Yes, thank you. So I dropped the bare bones question into the chat, which I'd like to flesh out a little bit. So you mentioned that the FileMaker OData feature is being done agile, which I take to mean that features are being released incrementally across major, minor patch versions. So my first question is there a change log? I looked at the documentation page because one of the challenges that I face in moving customers forward, and fair disclosure, big surprise, not everybody's always on the latest. So I have to kind of analyze what features are available so that I can figure out what I can deploy with their current deployment, what I can code out with the current deployment. And also, if I know what features are coming on what version, I can sell. I can say, hey, if you were to upgrade, because I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I understand your point. Yeah, and that's what I was saying. It's really they have become really agile now, and the release features are sometimes you really have to read the release notes very carefully to be aware that something is changed. I think that until 21.1, they were really putting a lot of energy into catching up with the 401 standard of OData. And now the point they're at is the mandatory feature to comply with this version of OData is there. So
So
everything mandatory.
release notes for a change log, you're saying there's not a unified change log like
I don't think there is. Maybe Rick is here and can tell us about it. I don't think there is a full change log, but now they announced that really everything mandatory in on this version 401, except the geolocation functions, are there. And of course, there are also optional things that are not implemented, but and will be, or some will be, I hope. But that's the point they are at.
okay. So release notes, it's a bit of a lobbying question, to be honest, because there's not a heck of a lot of change logs in the FileMaker documentation, although it would be good for everybody, including FileMaker, if there were. Claris. Thanks.
Yeah, certainly. I think as though I found some documents from Claris with 21.1 with the change detail for this version, I think. Not sure yet. I'm not sure if it was a public document or I'm not sure anymore. But for instance, you see here, I'm using those filter like select, first name and so on. I would like so much to be able to, no, sorry, next is, for instance, you have functions like this. I'm now going to use the count. I'm just adding count equal true. And this is just what what OData is going to return. It's just going to add the count of records to the response. This is just an addition to the response. Where that count becomes very interesting is that you can, and actually you can't really work around. There's a limitation of the number of records that can be returned, right? So you can control that with some limit, like we do with SQL, for pagination and so on. So you can you can ask with a query, okay, return just the first 10. So select some records with using filter, but return the first 10. And this count will return the total number of found records. It will return really the 10 records you asked for, but it says we found 301, and here are the 10 first ones you asked for. Okay, so you can organize your pagination on your front end. Okay. Now, for instance, I can modify and filter at the same time. So here is what I asked. I don't know what I asked really. Let's, I think it was this one. So I'm just going to delete that record using OData. I'm going to create a record. Where is it? This is created here. And now I'm going to create another one and another one. And it's created by OData. And I think the query here is, sorry, modify all the records that contain OData, which is basically find and replace field content. And this is what I did. Just replaced. Okay, so let's look at this script if you want. If you don't want, you have no choice. So it's just going that way. Sorry. And this is what it's doing. So the data is, I'm just pushing one field. Okay, I'm asking to this content will be inserted in the city field. By the way, I could of course replace several fields in one go. And the records are, sorry, not this. And the records are all the one where last name contains OData here, using a function. Isn't that cool? So here you see I'm using a function in the filter part.
Hey,
Okay.
Fabrice,
Yes.
can you use a function in the replace part? Like, could you replace something with data calculated on each field or each record, I mean?
You mean here, the value here would be calculated?
Not the value there, the value in the replace.
No.
Okay.
Let me think. No, you can't do that. You can no. This actually there is a OData feature that does this, but it's not implemented. It's not part of the mandatory part of OData, so it's not there. It's I don't know, it's a perform calculation, or I don't remember exactly, do calculation, but it's not in the current FileMaker implementation.
Fabrice, before you let that insert go, could you click into one of those three fields and change the first name from cool to really cool, and then don't commit the change so that you're essentially creating a record lock? And then
Really?
let your insert go.
Yeah, I see where you want me to go. So this would be here. This would be your response.
Record is locked. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, which means
None
actually,
of it happened. Yeah.
yeah, but we can't see it. So I'm just going to remove this and relock the record and do it like that. And you see I have this error, but nothing was, the other two were not processed either because it's transactional. Okay, so I'm just locking one record and nothing happens.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
And of course you can also delete with filter. Same thing. I just deleted all records containing OData. And now we can also perform scripts. So here I created a record by script, which means basically I just call the script, and the script is just basically creating a record, right? So my script here, perform script, just does this. It has a script parameter value. So sorry, I'm going to run it debugger like that. And then we have that. So the curl options are this one. It's supposed to run a script, perform a script. And the data is this one. Script parameter value is just the script parameter that I have to pass. Well, by the way, this is a great addition, I mean, it's a great advantage of OData against data API. For some reason, which I don't know why, but on data API, to perform a script, you have to use a get, which is really not something that should be, which also means that the length of your parameter is very limited, right? With OData, you can really send a huge parameter. Where was I? And the script name here has to be here. So script dot the name of your script in the URL. Okay? And then what you get, which is also very interesting, is that you get in the response, you get the script results, which is cool. So this is the error code, and this is the get script result. Okay, you have nothing to do other than just, so my script, my random script here just returns OK as a script result. And this is passed back to OData. Okay, this is really, really cool. So now some candy. And I'm importing from a table to itself. So this is what I'm doing here. I was importing 300 records. Probably I must have deleted one, or I don't remember why. Okay, I just imported a table to itself, and I was doing so. So what I was doing is this. So just same thing, running a script, and what the script does here. So it's basically exactly the same thing as before, but what the script does here, it creates a text file, and in the, it creates the text file and it insert text. So I wrote a nice XSLT style sheet for you. Actually, my friend ChatGPT helped me a lot. And it's taking care of translating the FileMaker XML, because as I said earlier, as I mentioned, you can ask OData to return XML, which means Atom XML. Sorry, so I'm translating Atom XML to Claris FM XML result, which can be nicely imported into FileMaker, right? So this style sheet is a template, and it also manages correctly the date formats, just for people living outside of the United States, the only country on Earth using month, day, year as a date format. You will know how great this is, because FileMaker fails at importing those non-US dates in XML. So basically, what I'm doing here, I'm inserting this XSLT, and I'm so sorry, I'm just replacing here some. I'm using the because we have some. Sorry, so maybe some of you don't know yet, but we have those functions now get file local elements, so I'm able to know which is the date format of a file, for instance. So I'm substituting some things in the XSLT, and I'm writing a new text file, which is the XXLT style sheet, and then I'm importing some XML file, which was returned by the OData using the XSL that I just created. And then I'm deleting the two files just to leave the place clean. Okay, so this is some nice thing, I think. Okay, so now you can import a table to itself if, of course, or to a copy, for instance, in some synchronization scenario between two servers, for instance, two databases, provided that the fields have the same names. And another, so yes, what was important here regarding OData is that in the curl options here, I was not asking for JSON, I was accepting atom XML. That was the difference. So the response here, as you can see, was not JSON anymore, it was XML. And the OData also accepts a third grammar, which is HTML. So if I do this, I get some HTML table, and if I hadn't been lazy, I would have probably opened that file automatically, but apparently I wasn't. So it must be somewhere on my documents path. Wait a second. Yeah, so I'm basically opening now my HTML file, and this is what I get here. So directly I was able to have a HTML table of my data. I think it's cool. It was not a very difficult thing because already before you could, export as HTML table, but you can do it using OData. Okay. I don't know where we are with the timing, if I still have some time to show you more stuff, if you want me to, or if you're not getting too bored.
We started late, so if you want to show like one more thing, I think that would be fine.
Okay, I just want to show you an example of integration. Here we use Freshdesk as a ticketing system. So I'm just going to send a new message to that. From my personal email, yeah, otherwise it won't work. Okay, and while this sorry, you're seeing data that should...
Heidi commented that you're staying true to your company name by showing one more thing.
Okay, so sorry?
Heidi commented that you're staying true to your company name by showing one more thing.
Oh yeah, of course. That's also I can tell my customer, oh, there's just one more thing to fix, but that's okay, so here I have a ticket, right? And I will make it a type or group, I think. No, so yeah, OData demo. And okay, I'm going to assign it to myself. And I will close. Well, first I'm going to go back for a minute to my database here. And I have another table here. I'm going to
We're not
remove
seeing
that.
your screen.
Sorry?
I said we're
You're-
not seeing your screen.
Are you
You're
not?
not seeing the
I'm
screen.
seeing his screen. Are you not seeing the OData demo table?
No, actually, I'm seeing the regular Zoom screen. Maybe something else got pushed. I'll check it out.
Oh, I'm sorry. But
You
you
might
do
have,
see.
there's two pills on the top, meeting and then Fabrice. You might have accidentally clicked on meeting.
Got it. I did. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay. So Oh dear. This is not going to work because I forgot something. Sorry, I'm sorry. The demo is not going to work, but you have to believe me. I forgot to insert my API key. Ah, gee, I forgot that. What I wanted to show you here, I have a, no, let's go back to FileMaker, and I have a script here that goes fresh desk. Yeah, and it should be, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, I forgot to go to, okay. It's not going to work this part, but I have a script here that's called receive ticket, right? Which is, I'm going to call from the back end of this fresh desk thing. Basically, fresh desk is just going to send a webhook to FileMaker saying, hey, I've got this ticket for you. Here's the ticket ID, okay? And this script is just going to go to the ticket table, find it. If it doesn't find it, it will create it and get the ticket information using the Freshdesk API. Okay, this is the scenario. How I'm going to do this is that here in the Freshdesk automation rules, I can do when a ticket is updated. Here I have this rule, and basically it says when the status of a ticket which is in the group OData demo is set to closed, then post, and it's calling this script with this URL, right, on OData. And with this Freshdesk API, backend, as well as some other services such as Twilio, for example, you can more or less control the payload. So here is what I have to do. I can here define my URL, which is this one. I want to talk to this table. I can authenticate. I have username and password, so I can just change it like that. And I can add some custom header, which is exactly what I want. And I can pass some payload, some JSON, some XML. Okay, so and they have placeholders like this, so they will replace the ticket ID and the ticket subject by their actual data. Okay, I'm sorry, I just forgot to implement my API key. So my demo is not going to work, but otherwise, as soon as I was closed, I would mark this ticket as closed. It would show up here, and I will see all the JSON information on the ticket itself. Okay, so this is one of example of integration. I just want, Chris, if I have to stop, just tell me.
Go ahead.
So the batches, so don't forget to replace this I said already. Be careful, OData is always going to return the full content of container fields as opposed to the data API. So store the containers in a separate table, which is always, in my opinion, a good practice anyway, but or pay attention to not to avoid selecting those fields in your queries. And the upload is limited to images and PDFs. So if you need to upload, for instance, a Excel document, a Word document, or whatever, upload some base64 and use auto-enter options to decode that. So this is a trick to know. So upload natively is limited to images and PDFs. Okay, the output, I mentioned it. And also, yes, that's a trick. It's also another great way to modify data outside of a script transactions. If you're in a script transaction and want some data to be modified and validated, you can use perform script on server also. Committed, you can use perform script on server or OData or any other way. And now this is a really important trick I'm going to give you. I mentioned at the very beginning of this session that I was querying my database using the primary key, if you remember. There is no such thing as a primary key in the UI, at least of FileMaker. You can't define a field as being your primary key, but you can edit your FM default fields.xml file, which creates, some fields by default each time you create a new table. And this, and you can find this on one of your fields. And this is very important. So, and I think if I'm understanding correctly, that these are two different notations. This part is the old one. You see, you have a tag list. The tag list is the important node. And the old notation, I think, was to have this attribute primary equal true. I think this is still there just for backward compatibility. I don't think this is mandatory anymore, but you need to have this dash FMI star like this with, I think this is the one here. The first one is the one that defines as a primary key. This is different thing. It's just to hide those fields when you create a new on the default created layout. Well, the second thing here, forget about it. It's a different topic, but this one dash FMI star space. Don't forget the space at the end here, the blank tag list, and this makes it your primary key. So this is used by OData or the data migration tool, things like that. Okay, so this is, of course, you need to have it on only one of your fields because, but this is, I think, a great tip to improve your, so I showed FreshDesk thing and just some resources here. Another great blog post by Steve Ferreira from Beeswax. This is really a great post. Look at that, read it. John Renfrew from Attitude has published a lot about OData. Actually, he's probably published by far the widest content on OData and FileMaker. And also the Claris documentation, which, as I said before, is much better now. I'm just going to show you. It's just here. The Claris documentation here is very easy to read, and you have the so first thing to read. You have also this page on the OData documentation for instance. Operators for comparisons and logical operators and things like that. And also for things that are not yet implemented in FileMaker, which makes you really want or like them to do it. Okay, I think I have now said everything I had on my plate.
Great.
So
Thank you very much. Thanks for being flexible and presenting in reverse order.
Fabrice, if I could make one comment that I noticed using OData, and that's a bit of a gotcha, that it doesn't open external data sources. So if you're calling something or running a FileMaker script and it's relying on an external data source.
What version were you using? I think this has been fixed.
Maybe it was the 21.1. But yes, it was a bit of a gotcha. It doesn't throw an error. It just returned nothing at all.
I'm surprised. No, it should really open the other file. Every time they have a new gateway like PSOS, the first release, they forget that they can have related files, and then they fix it. And now I think it's fixed.
Brilliant.
Excellent. Okay, in keeping with this upside down day, since Fabrice was last on the agenda and Julie was next to last, we're going to have Julie go next. So Julie Sigfrinius, would you like to take the floor?
That's great. Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate it. And it's nice to see and all of you and Fabrice as someone who doesn't know FileMaker like you do. I understood nothing of what you just said, but it was really well done.
Thank you.
Kidding.
That was not due to the accent, was it?
No, it wasn't the accent. It was just right over my head, but it looked fabulous. So fantastic. Chris, thank you for giving me a few minutes of time with this lovely group. I wanted to talk today and just give an update to this group about our upcoming event, which is Claris Engage in March in Austin. And share with you how it's going, and quite frankly, encourage those of you who are thinking about coming but haven't registered yet to register and join us, because we would love to have you there. And for those of you that are partners that are maybe not sponsors yet but want to consider sponsorship, maybe there's some things I can answer questions today about what that is, because we would love to have as many partners represented at arguably our world's largest event each year. So for those of you that haven't attended, I'll just spend, if it's okay, Chris, I'll just spend a few minutes just talking about kind of what's new and what's going to be different from last year.
Yeah, go ahead.
And then I can certainly take questions, or, this can be a free flowing conversation. I have no interest in having to do a monologue. If there's things that you want to know about Engage, let's talk about it. But for those of you that attended last year, we did it at Apple's campus in Austin. We're going to do that again. But we're making some changes, because when we asked those that attended last year, what things could we do better, you gave us a ton of ideas and suggestions, and we've tried to implement as many of those as possible. And one of them is right at the kickoff of the event. The keynote this year is in the morning of the first day of the event. And we're going to do it all in one space, because last year we ran out of space in our keynote room. And so we had to have an overflow room, and nobody wants to be in an overflow room. Everybody wants to be in the room where it's all happening. And so we're starting everything off at the Renaissance in Austin, a hotel, so that we have a big enough room to get all of our attendees all in one space. We're going to ask you to join us for breakfast in the morning, where we can just meet and greet everyone. And then we'll all go into the adjacent room, which is where Claris will deliver the keynote. And we have the heavy lifting at that moment to really set the tone for Engage, to inform you about product updates, our roadmap, our strategy. We have to deliver a compelling message that really sets the energy and the pace of Engage, and we look forward to doing that on Tuesday morning. We then all get on the bus and head on over to Apple, have lunch, and start sessions and learning. This year we have less sessions than last year by design. We had over 50 sessions last year. And the pace we heard from you is like, we didn't have enough networking time. I didn't have enough time between sessions to take a minute to go talk to my colleagues or my friends that I haven't seen in years. And so we want more networking time. And so we've adjusted the schedule to allow for that, so that there is more networking time. And then the other thing that was shared with us is the way we did the expos last year is we had some on floors 2, floors 3, floors 4 of the facility, and sort of broke up the expo that way. And then it felt like it was disconnected, and that's the feedback that we got. And so we went back to Apple, and we've secured the 5th floor, which we did not use at this facility, which is the Executive Briefing Center. And we've secured that entire floor. And so on that floor, we're going to bring the entire Claris Expo to that floor. and then so much more. So everything's going to be all in one place, the Claris booth, all of our sponsor booths, but other reasons to come there are as follows. You come off of the elevator or up the stairs, and you're going to see to your left off the elevator an invitation to visit something that hasn't been done in all of my recollection, which is a Claris museum. And we are inviting and crowdsourcing from our community a museum of FileMaker antiquities, is what it's called by the curators of this group. And we're inviting both digital as well as physical exhibits in this room, which is being curated by a combination of Clay Mackel and some community members. I think Beverly's on here, she's one of them. Stephen Dolinsky is another, and so on. And women innovating together are going to curate this room or manage this room, but it is going to be a journey of the 40 years of FileMaker. I'm looking very forward to watching this unfold. The demand has been quite interesting. And I think that Beverly, if someone hasn't put, or I can put a link, Clay did a launch in his LinkedIn and also on the community of the museum. So if you haven't seen that cute video, I just put it in the chat. And then at the end of that quick video, it's gives you a link to go. If you have something that you think, pictures or artifacts that you would like to contribute to this crowdsourced museum, we would love for you to submit the form and let the curators know. Also on this 5th floor, we're bringing back Tech Support Central, but it's new and improved. We're calling it Claris Support Central. So not only can you get tech support, booked time for tech support with Claris, but we're also bringing our UI UX designers from Claris. So if you want to talk about design and a design approach, learn about that, or have an instance where you want to talk with an expert in design, they will have a space in Claris Support Central. We have business experts that will have some tables there. So if you want business advice about growing your business or maybe your development process, your contracts, marketing, finding new business, all of the above, leads. There's some business experts that will be able to talk with you about that. And then the visionary bar folks are also going to be in that room. That's the expertise for decades of how FileMaker has been implemented and integrated in all kinds of situations. If you want help, you want to pick their brain, they're going to be in that room as well. So I think that the Claris Support Central, the new and improved, is going to be at great demand, and it's just adjacent to the expo hall. The after party is going to be in Cafe Max. It's a different one than we did last year, but not any less spectacular. And our theme is vintage arcades, and we are bringing an arcade experience of pinball machines and those kinds of things. And the Apple catering, which it's the Wolfgang Puck division, is doing the catering for that event as they did last year, and they've actually customized the menu for the theme. So it's going to be a whole lot of fun for that after party event on that first evening. We are enhancing how we're showing off those that win the Excellence Awards. Instead of that being a mention really quickly at a keynote or traditionally at our closing session, we're actually building a display that's right past the main entrance when you enter Engage. So you can go, it's going to live for the entire time that Engage is going on. So if you want to go and see who has won those Excellence Awards, we're going to celebrate that, I think, in a better way and in a more thorough way for those that work really hard to have success with our platform. We're bringing back a closing event. It's not a closing session, it's a closing reception. This is an opportunity to come and get, a soda or a beer and hug and say your goodbyes and kind of wrap the show. So we're doing an ending, not only the beginning at the keynote, but an ending to the event. And if you just want to stay a little bit longer, we invite you to do an add-on training day. So our training day, instead of being before DevCon or Engage, we're doing it after. And that was based again on feedback of, gosh, I attended the Connect session last year, and if I would have understood the context, then I would have gone to the training class. So we thought, well, what if we have all the sessions and then we allow folks to attend the training afterwards as an add-on training day? And we have 6 options this year. Last year we had 4, this year we had 6. So there's integrations with Todd Geist, there's AI with Chris Ippolite, there's staying current with the platform with Bob Bauer and Ernest Coe, there's foundational FileMaker training with Martha Zink and Sarah Severson. There's a design class by Alexis Allen. She's been going all over the world, and so we had to have her here for sure. And then Wim DeCourt is doing a session on server, which is always very popular. So I would argue that that's a really, really nice lineup. So if you want, there's something for everyone and something for every level. There are over 35 community speaker sessions. So this is a community driven event. Engage does not happen without you as the community and driving the content that is most important for this community. And we're excited to be able to work with all of those speakers. And Claris, besides the keynote, will be delivering 6 sessions, and those sessions, if they're not already posted, it's within 24 to 48 hours that those sessions for Claris are going to be posted so that you can see. But Louis De La Parra is a speaker, Ronnie Rios is a speaker, I believe Sangeeta, Clay Mackel are speakers. So all the usual suspects that you want to say, I think Robert Holsey is going to be there speaking. They're going to be there at the event and delivering content, and then available in the booth to talk to one-on-one. So we're very excited. We still have space available for registrations. We still have some sponsorships that are available. We encourage you to consider this for you and your teams and to join us. And we would really very much love to see all of you at Engage where it makes sense. And with that, I'll pause and see if there are any questions that I can answer that perhaps I didn't cover related to Engage. I'm happy to clarify anything if anybody has any questions. Oh, and I see some folks are putting up links and helping me along, so that's great. Thank you very much. Oh, shuttle bus schedule. So the shuttle bus schedule is going to be built in February based on the information that we get from those that have signed up, letting us know where they're staying, which hotel they're staying at. We're posting in the next couple of weeks what we anticipate to be the hotels that will have pickup and drop off. And then we'll finalize and time that schedule for you and give that full picture once we have almost everyone fill out their profile, which will happen in February. So we're basing that based on what you tell us as to where the buses will be. I will state that we've doubled the buses and the transportation from last year. So there's a lot more buses that are going to be crawling around the domain and the Renaissance to get people to and from the event. Someone is asking, who are the curators of the museum? Right now, it is Beverly Voss and Stephen Delinsky from Oceans West and Clay Mackel. And I'm sure if they need help, they're going to reach out to the community to foster some additional help. But those are our 5 folks. Oh, and I see that Beverly even answered that. So maybe I should scroll up before I answer.
We got the last name.
That's right.
Christian had a parking question.
Sure. There is parking space at all locations. That is correct. There's no charge for parking at any of the locations. So, and there's plenty of parking. So yes, if you don't want to use the bus transportation, you can drive there. No problem.
We have
Cool.
a studio form for you to fill out if you want to contribute to the museum, either bring things to display or have links to things that we want to show, or graphics that we can put up on a great big huge monitor. So if you go to that link that I posted in community, it has a link to where you can actually post your items. that you want to share.
Great. Cool. I think Sean made a comment, but not a question. So I think, oh, is there an easy way to pick out the Claris sessions on the schedule? I think so. If we don't recognize the speaker names for Claris employees, is there? Yes. Any of the sessions that are occurring in the room, Philosophers Rock at Engage, are Claris driven sessions. So if you go online and at claris.com/engage and look at the sessions and look by room, then you will be able to know that those are Claris driven sessions. One thing I forgot to mention that I should mention is for those of you that attended last year, we had an attendee app called Events that we used that was not as sufficient as we would wanted it to have to help us navigate the event. This year, I'm pleased to let you know that DevCon to Go has been refreshed by Klaus at Datamatics and his team to Engage to Go. And it will have maps in it to help you navigate where you're going for each of your sessions or where to have lunch. It will have the ability for you to customize your schedule. It will have the ability for you to take notes per session and to access your surveys. There will be some training and some announcement on that on Community Live about 30 days prior to the event. But I think we're going to have a much, much more compelling way for you to be able to enjoy and consume and plan for Engage by using FileMaker Go and Klaus's good work. And I looked at a preview of his update a few days ago, and it's gorgeous. So it's a really nice looking app. He's also sharing that app, the coding, the under the hood of the app with anyone who wants it, which I think is a great gift. So if you see some features that he's implemented that you want to use, that's going to be available to anybody that accesses that app. And it will be available in community about 30 days before the event. Cool. I think I answered Tony's question while I was talking.
Yeah, we
Yes,
crossed.
it will be. I was reading your mind. It's good. All right. Will there be a session on Engage to Go? Yes, Klaus is going to run a session on the evolution of DevCon to Go to Engage to Go as a success story, and that will be at Engage. So that, yes, he has one of the sessions. He anticipated that someone might want to know more about the app, and so we put him on the schedule. All right, well, Chris, maybe I'll turn it back over to you. I'm not seeing any additional questions. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me at sig@claris.com. I've unsuccessfully retired again because I had so much fun at Engage last year that I wanted to do it one more time. So if you have any questions, sig@claris.com. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have and hope to see you there.
Excellent. Okay, thanks for that.
Yeah.
All right, next up is going to be the Tech News Roundup. So let me grab this and hit share. Let me know if you guys can see that.
Yep. Yes.
All righty. So here we are at the January edition of Tech News Roundup. There was much discussion prior to the meeting about the wildfires in LA, which don't really qualify for tech news, but I'm glad we had a chance to talk through some of that stuff because a lot of people are affected. Top of the hour. So for those of you not familiar, I sort of generally try and do FileMaker specific news, followed by like Apple ecosystem news, followed by more general tech ecosystem news. And so in the FileMaker specific department, there was a new release for the ACF plugin. It's now version 1737. And this is an Excel plugin, so it can do stuff like that. So if you have any need to do like formatted Excel, I think this particular one is doing cash flow budgeting. And so you can see it's a multi-tab thing, has heavy formatting, different text styles and things like that. And so fairly sophisticated stuff if you have need of producing stuff like this. I think the plugin's 89 bucks. And it comes with a demo application that will generate this kind of stuff. So if you need kind of a push to get a running start, that can all be found right here. So just FYI on that. I think that came out 2-3 days ago, something like that, very recently. Apple Intelligence. There's been a little bit of a kerfluffle about Apple Intelligence news summary. They have summarized BBC news content incorrectly. The news outlet has said that incorrect Apple Intelligence notification summaries are harming trust not only in the BBC but more widely. So they're not happy about it.
BBC at home are going ballistic.
So not a tempest in a teapot. They're very unhappy. So Apple has not shared any specifics on how they plan to address these concerns. They have said they're on it, and they said I think their iOS 18.3 is in beta testing, expected to be released to everyone later this month. And the changes to the notification summaries may be included in that update. So it remains to be seen. And so just oops, here we go. Here's some of the particular statements involved and a link for those of you interested in reading more on it. It's on 9to5Mac. You can check out that information. And speaking of artificial intelligence and negative consequences, I guess would be the segue. I'm sure most of you heard about the Cybertruck explosion outside of a Trump hotel in Las Vegas. Apparently, the police have found that the perpetrator who did this actually used ChatGPT to plan the blast. Quote from the police department was, "We knew that AI was going to change the game at some point or another. And this is the first incident that they are aware of on US soil where ChatGPT was utilized to help an individual build a particular device to learn information on how to basically make the explosive more effective." And so pretty hair-raising stuff. I think I've spoken in months past about it's fairly trivial these days to jailbreak an LLM to have it tell you stuff that it shouldn't be telling you. And apparently it actually assisted the Cybertruck explosion on how to most effectively make the blast. So if you look in the center paragraph here, it said this includes questions about sourcing the explosives, the effectiveness of the explosives, whether fireworks were legal in Arizona, where to buy guns in Denver, all sorts of stuff that, someone who's not right in the head probably doesn't need to get access to. So LLMs are already starting to cause havoc. Whoops, I think I speeded past one here. So NVIDIA has been in the news a ton lately. They were just at CES and I think that's Vegas. And had a ton of announcements there. But prior to that, this came out at the end of the year on December 29th. They are leaning big into robotics. And so they are working on building computers, codename called Jetson Thor, that are specifically designed to be sort of the brains of the new generation of robotics. They're saying this is due to the explosion of generative AI models, the ability to train robots on them using simulated environments. And I want to touch on the simulated environment a bit more here. Let's get into what NVIDIA announced at CES. So there are a bunch of big announcements. These are probably the top 6 here. So GeForce, they're we've talked a bit about the new chipset NVIDIA has been working on. So these are the new GPUs, the Blackwell GPUs. So it's a 5.0 series. So the flagship is going to be the GeForce RTX 5090, 5090, priced at $2,000. There's going to be a 5080, 5070, etc. They are also coming out with desktop GPUs. Those will be released in late January and early February. So it's not just the GPUs, they're also coming out with a Blackwell-based laptop called Max-Q. Then the Cosmos World Foundation models, which is an open license platform for robotics training. So it'll allow developers to transform real-world driving data into billions of virtual simulations. So basically, if you're someone like Google or anybody who's been driving around the roads with a camera on top of the car, you can take all that real-world data and turn into virtual simulations to train your robots on if you have robots. They also announced AI foundation models for RTX AI PCs and NVIDIA NIM microservices, all based on these new Blackwell GPUs. Then there's the Nematron. It's a family of large language models for optimized for things like instruction following, coding, chat functions. So again, great stuff for robots. The Llama 3.1 Nematron 70B is available now from NVIDIA's API catalog. And then Digits, I think this was probably the biggest announcement. It is basically like a Mac Mini, but it's NVIDIA GPU. So it's like a compact AI supercomputer, about the same size as a Mac Mini. It has a Blackwell super chip in it. What else? Up to 200 billion parameters, running LLMs locally, doesn't rely at all on cloud infrastructure. And then the DLSS4, which is an AI-driven upscaling technology. It has a feature called multi-frame generation, so it can generate 3 additional frames for every traditionally rendered frame, increasing frame rates for people who are doing generative AI to make video with. And then they have Drive, which is a AV platform. It's a end-to-end solution. It includes hardware, sensors, software, basically anything you would need to build an autonomous vehicle. So they're trying to supercharge the autonomous vehicle space. They announced a partnership with Toyota to integrate Drive into Toyota's next generation vehicles. And this is also on the heels of collaborations with Aurora and Continental, which use NVIDIA Drive to do driverless truck deployments. They think their automotive revenue is going to reach in the neighborhood of 5 billion. So tons of news, lots of big splashy stuff. I don't know if you've watched the keynote, but he was on stage with a whole bunch of robots. A very impressive looking announcement. And then in response to all this, the NVIDIA shares sank 6.2% on Tuesday, which is their worst one-day percentage drop since like last September. So one of the biggest losers of the thing. So clearly the market was expecting more. Apparently what they're disappointed with is that he didn't talk more about the next generation, what comes after Blackwell chips, and how fast are they going to scale up. So they were sort of like, yeah, that's nice, but what comes next? And he didn't really have anything to say to that. This is something kind of near and dear to my heart. I have an Apple Watch. I use it to keep track of laps while I swim in the pool. And the Journal of Environmental Science and Technology found out that the fluoroelastomers, which are in these watch bands and probably actually in your phone case too, can contain large quantity of a forever chemical known as perfluorohexanoic acid. It is unclear to what extent this could be absorbed through the skin. I know, just putting these on and off, there's a lot of friction between the end of the band and where you slide it in through the little band slot. So I'm imagining little particles get out of it, but to what extent that gets absorbed in your skin, who knows? But Anyway, I'm looking for a new watch band because who needs to roll the dice on their health on that? So anyway, it's a type of PFAS. Everybody's heard of PFASs, but they're in your watch band and they're probably also in your phone case. Let's see. There is a new Android spyware campaign out there. The infection routine starts with a phishing site hosted on GitHub. It's dressed up to look like the RU store, App Store. And it's a fake version of Telegram Premium. So if you're on Android and you use Telegram Premium, watch out for this because it's really a stealer software. So it'll steal data from the targeted Android device. It'll grab your notifications, messages, and send it all up to a Firebase database endpoint. So that's no fun. And then in the world of Apple, the poor Apple, beleaguered Apple Vision Pro seems to be out of production. There's reduced demand. You can look on macrumors.com. That was on the last day of 2024, 12/31, citing people directly involved in making components for the headset. The report said that the scaling back of production began in early summer. So this has been going on for a while. Saw weak demand, huge price point. Apple is said to have told Luxshare, which is a Chinese company that serves as their assembler for Vision Pro, that it would need to wind down production in November. They seem to think that there's going to be a second generation Vision Pro that's in active development currently. It would add the introduction of an M5 chip and Apple Intelligence. And so they're projecting that that device could launch between fall of this year and spring of next year. So they're, because there's so many of these components laying around, they're expecting the updated model to reuse many components from G1 Vision Pro to offset all this surplus inventory they have sitting in their supply chain. In more, less than thrilling news, so the World Economic Forum is having their big thing in Davos coming up in the next day or two, I think. And so they've been surveying the people who participate in big confabs like that. And so 41% of the companies saying they're going to really decrease workforces due to AI implementation. So they're talking about the likes of postal service clerks, executive secretaries, payroll clerks, graphic designers and legal secretaries are just outside the top 10 fastest declining job roles due to AI impact. And they also say, conversely, AI skills themselves are increasingly in demand. So close to 70% of companies are planning to hire new workers with skills to design AI tools and enhancements. 62% intend to recruit more people with skills to better work alongside AI. They think the primary impact of these technologies might lie in the potential for augmenting human skills through human-machine collaboration. So basically pair programming with an AI rather than outright replacement, given the continued importance of human-centered skills. So, however, that being said, many workers have already been replaced by AI. So we talked about, I think, Dropbox and Duolingo a month or two ago. They directly cited AI as a reason for making layoffs. So there's that. And so, I'm being a little lighthearted and perhaps what shouldn't be a lighthearted topic about sometimes you're the windshield, sometimes you're the bug. But I think this group is ideally positioned to be the windshield in this. And so, I probably sound like a broken record at this point, but you should absolutely stay on top of what's going on in the AI world and make sure your skills stay up to scratch and you will remain the windshield. This was just something that I think it was posted by Bloomberg maybe, but this is Forbes picking up the story. So this is Wall Street banks saying they're expecting to slash up to 200,000 jobs. The impending job cuts are expected to primarily affect back office, middle office, operational departments where routine and repetitive tasks are prevalent. So basically, if you're doing a job that's the same thing over and over again, AI is probably coming for your job. Let's see, ByteDance. ByteDance runs a, I guess, a service called Daobao. It's a AI chatbot, has 51 million active users. They maintain, ByteDance does, that they've been following all of the US's restrictions about not buying H100s for its data centers outside the US, but they're finding loopholes to get around it and getting hold of the restricted GPUs. Net neutrality has sort of been in and out of the news over the last several years. But there's something called the Chevron defense, or a Chevron, I guess, I'm not even sure what I'd call it, protocol or doctrine. That's the word I'm looking for, the doctrine. The Sixth Circuit Court struck it down and said, you know what, we should not defer to federal agencies and assume they know what they're doing. And this was a suit filed against the FCC by broadband industry associations, and now it looks like net neutrality is going down again. So, and the incoming administration is certainly no friend to net neutrality, so that's going down. Let's see. Yeah, the FCC was trying to say ISPs are basically common carriers, just like phone companies, because some of them are phone companies. And had to treat all internet traffic the same, but apparently that's going away. Sam Altman has his own personal blog. This was on the 6th, I guess. Over the weekend, he had posted to his personal blog saying that we believe in 2025 we may see the first AI agents join the workforce, in quotes, and materially change the output of companies. So there are implications to this because the deal that OpenAI has with Microsoft is that if they achieve AGI, then they can basically break the deal and go their separate ways, and they can choose other cloud providers instead of Azure. There are tons of knock-on effects to this. So he's saying it's coming, and it's coming in 2025. So I think there'll be a bit of shift, I guess, in some of the industry dynamics between, arguably two of the biggest, most important players in the space, that being OpenAI and Microsoft. So we shall see. There's a lot more to it. I would, you can just Google Sam Altman, we know how to build AGI, and you'll find several articles on it, and you can find his blog post, which takes a while to get to the point. So it might be more fruitful time-wise for you to just read the write-ups about it as opposed to reading the blog post. This was interesting. So Meta, the Facebook people, has decided to eliminate fact-checking just recently. I think this happened, 3 days ago? So of course there was immediate backlash to this with people posting stuff like this. Mark Zuckerberg, dead at 36, said social media sites should not fact-check posts. And so they posted that on Facebook. So gotta love the passive aggressive resistance, but there you are. Let's see. And this is my last slide. This was just some good news after a lot of bad news. Plastic waste has been a long time problem. There's a whole garbage patch in the Pacific that's full of, microparticles of plastic waste. And so there is a researcher named Jason Barrow. He's a professor in the College of Engineering at I want to say University of Alabama. Yes, University of Alabama. He'd been working with compounds called amines for a couple of years, experimenting with how best to break down plastics or decompose plastics into useful constituent parts. But he just decided to work with a new compound. He said, I've been working with imidazole, I believe is how you pronounce it, for much of my career. It's pretty amazing and versatile. It's used in pharmaceuticals, textiles, paints, printing, and a whole lot of other things. So he wanted to see what it would do for breaking down plastic. And apparently it completely broke down plastic, super, super efficient. They're working on getting patents for this process, but you know, I'm sure there's a lot of things that have to happen between now and then, but it looks like we are on the way to getting a genuinely useful um, supply chain or reverse supply chain for taking waste plastic and turn it into useful byproducts that can be used again in high value plastics. So there you go. That is the end of the new Tech News Roundup. And I think we're going to go into the breakout room. So I'm going to pause the video recording. All right, we have resumed, and now the old last will become first, and vice versa. Jonathan Jeffrey, I saw you at EngageU in Malmo, Sweden, and saw you do a really nice presentation on vectorizing PDF content and thought the group here would love to see it. And so here you are. So feel free to take it away. Your screen is being shared, so you can just launch your presentation.
Is it actually being scanned? Ah, excellent. Yes, so they asked me to do an intro picture, and this is it said in the blurb about me that I was a paleontologist, started as a paleontologist, and these are the fishes that I used to work on. They are this actually one is from Cincinnati, but they're fairly serious predators from the Mississippi and Pennsylvania, if you know your geology, and this is the kind of size reconstruction. The larger ones are about 20 feet long, and they lived in quite shallow fresh water. So yeah, that's my off time. If I launch my presentation, here we go. So it's about AI and vectorization. Basically, I've seen a lot of presentations about what marvelous things AI could do, but it all seemed to be, I couldn't think of a practical use case for a lot of them. But then a couple of months ago, or about 3 months ago, my boss, the CEO of the company, came down and said, "Look, we've got this problem and we need AI to solve it." So it was kind of a top-down request to solve this issue. So we did a really agile development within about 4 weeks. So I just wanted to show people a practical example of an actual use of AI, and this is now gone company-wide. So Maslow, the company I work for, they're a development finance company, but they specialize in really big developments. So things like if you want to build a hotel, or you want to build an apartment block or a shopping mall, these are the guys you go to for your mortgage. So yeah, the loans are really somewhere between 10 and 200 million each. There's obviously, before you lend that sort of money, there are a lot of checks. And one of the ones are valuation reports, where they send somebody to the site and they try and assess, is this project really worth the money? And is it in the right area? What are the property prices? The problem they have, I'll give you an example. This is my home in the UK with my little funny British car. When we bought it in Britain, you have to have a survey done when you buy it. And it did mention that there was additional insulation in the loft. I thought, that's fantastic. That's really handy. But then you read the small print at the end of the valuation report, and it mentions that they don't actually kind of move anything or check underneath anything, and they do not lift the insulation or go. And basically, I think what the guy had done is gone up the loft in a ladder and just kind of looked through the loft hatch and gone, oh yeah, I can see some glass fiber. Brilliant, it's got loft insulation. And of course, that insulation only extended for about 6 feet away from the loft hatch, and the rest of the loft was pretty much uninsulated. So it was catching that the valuation report wasn't really worth very much. So the questions were not what's contained in these valuation reports, but actually is what's in it any good, or are there so many caveats and so many things missing that they're actually not worth the paper they're written on. So they were currently using a list of 29 questions in an Excel spreadsheet that somebody had to read through the report and answer these questions, like in this case, has it discussed planning permissions? Has it discussed the local property values? Has it discussed any environmental impacts during the build or during occupation and use? And somebody had to sit down and read these things. The problem is, if you're doing a £200 million development, these valuation reports can be 200 or 300 pages long, very, very dense in data, and it can take hours and hours for someone to sit down and read it. So it was basically a high cost on the staff time and money, and it's not a particularly enjoyable task either. It's fairly tedious. So enter Moyer. My IT boss is really good at doing acronyms. He should work for NASA. So this stands for Maslow AI Assistant. And it has a little natty logo that he designed as well. So rather than using the inbuilt FileMaker AI functions that were only just newly released at the time, we use directly OpenAI as our engine. Because it's one of the market leaders and it's regularly updated. And we have a paid subscription, so we know our data isn't being used for training future versions, so we won't suddenly have confidential information appear in ChatGPT. We stuck to using FileMaker as our user interface and to store all the settings because it's a good way of storing predefined sets of questions that were the equivalent of that Excel spreadsheet. We can predefine all our AI settings the way we want to talk to ChatGPT. But also, as a company, we already use FileMaker for mapping these projects and as our main database source. So it actually integrated very handily with the expertise in the company and the solutions we're using. Also really handily is the valuation reports are already uploaded into container fields inside FileMaker, our FileMaker solution. Fantastic. And as I said, we were minimum viable product using Agile, and it just literally 4 weeks from the initial conversations through to production of version 1. We're now on version sort of 1.4-ish, lots of little incremental changes. So question was, can AI read these reports for us and do something useful? The first problem we have is 200 pages of text is just way too long to upload to a GPT query. It's this thing called a token, which it's something like it's a part of a word that has meaning. So it's like indivisible has you've got divisible and you've got in, meaning the inverse of divisible. So that will be 2 tokens. So in practice, it means somewhere around 50,000 words, which these 200 pages reports were hitting. So we needed a way to exert just the relevant bits of the text to answer a question. And the way to this was something called vectorization and word embeddings, which I think FileMaker now does to some extent. So basically, you want to break the text into smaller chunks of a few hundred words each. And in each chunk, you use a specialist language model to assign basically numbers that describe the meaning of this thing. I shall give you a demonstration in a second. And basically, there are lots of different trained models to do this. So this is my sort of mansplaining a little bit. I don't really understand it fully myself, I've got to admit. But we were looking, say we've got these types of sentences, like how royal is a word, because I'm British, how common is the word, or how female or male is the word, or how formal or informal is this word, how serious or humorous is the word, and how maybe courteous or offensive is the word. So if you take the example of the word king, you might rate that like this, pretty high up on the royal scale. It's obviously a male word, not a female word. It's quite a formal term, and it's not very serious, but it is a more serious term. It's not humorous, and it's a courteous way to address a king if you ever meet a king. The word queen would actually have more or less the same profile, but it would score highly on the female scale, not down the male scale. But I don't know how many British English people are watching this, but the word knob is an English word, which is short for nobility, and it's a slang word for anyone who's posh, anyone who's got a sort of wealthy background. So it's not exclusively royal, and it's not male or female. You can be a female knob or a male knob, but it's definitely informal. And it's humorous because there's a double meaning, because knob also has another meaning in English, which I will answer in the text if anyone asks me. And it's offensive. You don't call somebody a knob politely. It's an offensive term for somebody of a wealthy background. But you can take these examples and you can map them out as a series of numbers, sort of how high they score in this context.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Who's in charge of creating and evaluating the categories? Because that's going to mold your worldview in ways that you may not even be aware of.
Yes, I mean, these are trained models in the same way that the chat completion models are trained and the large language models. These are another type of model, so they're trained over literally billions of pages of text. You don't really, as an AI person, as a user, you don't really interface with this. But you can see there's about 1,600. When you train it in AI, each word is not this 5 or so values, it's the 1,600 different values. And I think, and again, this is really me a bit out of my depth here, I think it does it based on the overall, all the words in your chunk. It decides how best to map it itself. So I'm afraid I can't really answer it very well because I don't really understand it, but it is an industry standard way of returning. So I'll if you don't mind, I'll move on to show you the results because it definitely works.
Thank you.
But I'm sorry, I would look at
no, it's just I have actually a degree in linguistics, and it's making me wonder. So
if you can look it up and come and
yeah,
explain it to me,
I will do research myself on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, because I did warn you this is a bit of a mansplaining thing. But basically, the result is that the chunks of text with an overall similar meaning end up having an overall quite similar array. So you can see these first two arrays, the first two arrays have values that are quite close to each other, whereas the third array has quite different numbers. And these basically stored as a text file that's stored alongside the original text, which is why it's called embedding. It's like metadata. And it's a one-off operation you call. It takes not very long, just a few seconds for each document you upload, and you can store the result of those vectorizations on OpenAI along with your document, so it can just be reused. You don't have to do it every time you're trying to investigate the documents. So, as I understand it, when you ask your question is vectorized and turned into this array of numbers in using the same model, and it then uses that to locate those chunks of text within the document that are quite close in meaning to your question. So on the basis that these chunks of text are probably the best place to start when you want to answer your question. And I say it's like an old-fashioned table of contents. That it's not reading the entire document, it's looking at something like a table of contents and saying, that's probably the best place to start to answer this question. It's known as retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, which is really confusing because RAG obviously stands for red, amber, green, which is also used extensively in our company to do with risk warnings. As an example of what it's doing, this is again real my mansplaining. When we were in Malmo to give this presentation, this was our latitude and longitude. And if you wanted to find bars that were nearby, I'm sure all of us could work out how you do it. Is you just get the latitude and longitudes of bars and you find the ones that are closest to 55.6 and 12.99, and you home in on that. It also can give you the distance, if you like, from where the bars are. So you can list your bars in order of proximity. In the same way, using these vectorization arrays, the mathematics is very well established. It goes back to Victorian times, but you can use that to find the chunk of text that's closest, and then one you think that's next closest, and one that's next closest. So you can order all these chunks in order of how close they are in meaning to your question. So you can start off with the closest one, on the next closest one, and you can there's some default settings to say how many chunks do you want to return, and so here was a sort of picture trying to illustrate what it means. Is you can order all these chunks of text and sort of how close they are to what you're asking, and you can use those to just retrieve the best chunks, the ones that are most likely to be able to answer your question. And these chunks are actually short enough that you're not going to hit these token limits. It also obviously has the benefit that the AI isn't reading through the whole document every time to answer a question. It's just reading through just a few pages of text to answer the questions. Yeah, I mentioned this. This is a talk from a little while ago. So the embeddings were released in 2024 for FileMaker. And I'm sure you've seen that demonstrated, and I'm sure you've talked about that in previous meetings. So it was released after we started to work on Moyer. I don't know whether we would have integrated it had it been available, because I think we probably still would have gone down the chat the OpenAI direction, but it's useful to use them. So one of the things we had was when answering these questions, we wanted to produce supporting quotes from the text so we can really check the answers. So if you're saying, has planning permission been granted for this property, it will return something to say, yes, it has been granted, and here's a quote to say in the report, these are the lines. And we also wanted it to be given page numbers, so you can just go to page 121 and find the paragraph that talks about planning permission. The hitch is vectorization doesn't preserve page numbering, it ignores it entirely. So although you can return a quote, it can't tell you whereabouts in the document that is, which is quite annoying. If you ask OpenAI to give you page numbers, it will do it, but they're not always correct. And after a couple of nights of bashing around with this, trying to work out why is it usually correct, but not always, I eventually thought, actually, what I'll do is just ask OpenAI, open ChatGPT, how are you getting page numbers? And it basically says, I rely on the PDF's internal structure, navigation elements like text markers and headers and footers to donate sections or page transitions, which is basically saying it more or less guesses. And it guesses pretty well, but what page things are. But if you've got a big document, the guesses are, but by the time you're on page 120 something, if you've got lots of embedded pictures and you've got tables and things, it can just get totally wrong. So you just can't rely on them. So what we decided to do was, there are third-party API cloud services that could extract text from a PDF. The useful thing is it returns it just the raw text, Unicode text, but it returns it page by page. So what we did was then add some sort of markup, just angle bracket saying this is the beginning of page 1 of this document, and this is the end of page 1 of this document. Do that process before we go to vectorize the text. So now all we had to do was let OpenAI know that there's some sort of page markup on this. Come back to that in a minute. So this process of extracting the text and tagging it, does add a minute or two to the initial upload of each PDF. But as I said before, these valuation reports are already in container fields in our in-house database. So we just ran a nightly script that looks for any new valuation reports that have been uploaded, and just automatically runs this pre-processing, splitting it out into markup text and doing the vectorization, so that when you come to use it, you don't have this lag. And now we find beautifully, when we ask OpenAI, it can return the quote and it returns completely accurate page numbers. The beauty is it literally takes 3 or 4 minutes to answer all the 29 questions on the checklist, not a couple of days. Fantastic. And of course, OpenAI never gets bored. It's always enthusiastic. It's always hardworking. Going on about the AI system, what we have to do is the questions are wrapped up with some very specific AI settings called the prompt. And we can obviously save that in FileMaker and use that. So someone can just say, I want to use this valuation report checker, and it can send all these predefined settings to AI. So in practice, all the user has to do is open Moyer, select the PDF they want, select the valuation report checker, push go, and it answers all those questions for them, and they can go off and make a cup of coffee, or because they're British, make a nice cup of tea with milk in it. Another thing we did from early on was actually let the users make their own checklists. You know, have you got any boring, repetitive tasks that involve reading through loads of PDFs? If so, why not create your own checklists? This is in practice done more or less within a department. So we've got a department that arranges smaller loans called bridging loans that are for you know, if you've got an existing property and you want to convert it or to do it up or refurbish it, these are kind of smaller loans. We've got a team that work exclusively on that, and they found the valuation reports. They have a kind of different set of questions they want to ask, and a guy called Nick built his own set of checklists. This has proved really, really handy. Me being a former paleontologist, I built one called paleoichthyologist, which asks questions about fossil fish. But it was handy, because I knew the PDFs, I knew the content very well, and I could ask questions that I already knew the answer to, just to see how well OpenAI was responding. Another thing that was useful was refining the questions, because as people found certain questions weren't always returning the correct answers, the users could go in and they could edit the questions. Probably the next slide, isn't it? Hang on. Yeah, because so my point here, Paddington Bear, OpenAI, I always say it's like an enthusiastic high school work experience student. They work really, really hard. They will diligently do what you ask, but it doesn't take much ambiguity in what you've asked for OpenAI to go off completely in the wrong thing. Do it diligently and quickly, but it's just not what you wanted at all. So it's the precision of the wording of what you're asking. So that's why we gave the users the ability to rate the quality of the questions, but also to experiment with subtly rewording the questions. And then you can converge on this. This seems to work for most of the reports we're doing, or all the reports we're doing. So this was something to do with in Britain, we got a Disabilities Discrimination Act. So it's to do with disabled access to properties. And you know, that needs to be discussed, and has that been thought through? If you're doing a block of apartments, are there ground floor apartments for wheelchair access and those kinds of things? And the questions are pretty similar worded, but we just changed it subtly over the course of some iterations, and we found that this final wording, is there any discussion of how the Disability Discrimination Act or the Equality Act might affect the project, got the answer we wanted pretty consistently. So the prompt is the other big thing. Is the prompt basically tells AI how to behave, and it sets the tone for the outputs. So by default, OpenAI and ChatGPT seems to want to behave like it's producing a magazine article or a blog. And you have to kind of really tell it, no, you're not doing that. What you're doing is something more serious. We found to say, you are an expert property lawyer, property attorney, and you're reading a report and wanting to produce something, and that seemed to set the tone of our answers correctly. You could also tell it, I want the results to be bullet pointed, and in the end, the overall result, I asked for it to be done in JSON format. So FileMaker, then we can just use FileMaker's native JSON handling to extract the information really easily. Another important thing is answer only from the uploaded PDF, only from the report. If you don't tell it that, it will go off and use all its training data to tell you all about the Disabilities Act, and all the lovely things about you know, planning permissions. You need to say, no, just focus on just from that PDF that you've uploaded. And again, as with the questions, your prompt has to be really precise. Otherwise, your little high school work experience student will find a way of going off and doing the wrong thing entirely. Another handy thing in the prompt is just to give it really lots of examples of how you want your answer to look. And it reads those and thinks, oh, okay, I just need to sort of copy this and send the results like that. We used FileMaker to help reduce all these options, so it wasn't a whole load of sort of text-based things that you could just click some buttons in the FileMaker interface. And in the back end, we used calculations to format a lovely bit of prompts that we could send to OpenAI and would give you back what you wanted. So here's an example of the user interface, and mostly, you just give it the assistant a name and a title, and this is the personality. Like, you are a paleontologist, and I want you to answer some questions on a research paper. The summary, this is giving it more information about how I want you to summarize your answer, the maximum number of words in your answer, and it builds all this with some other settings in the background to a much bigger piece of text that we send to OpenAI to tell it how to behave. This is the resultant text. So the first part is that personality. I tell it to base its answer only on the text provided, and not on any other source. Then I tell it about the page numbering thing, where we split it up into separate pages and use our own markup. So this paragraph tells it all about that and how to use it. Then I tell it it's got to respond in JSON format, and I give it some information about what JSON fields I want it to return. I wanted to have a numeric answer where 0 was untrue, 1 was true, and 2 was I simply, that question isn't addressed, so I can't tell you yes or no. And 3 was, this isn't a simple yes no question, this is a more complex question you're asking me. So please give all the facts and figures when you can, etc. And then please give me a summary of your question of at least 300 words. And then here's some examples. So I give it a full JSON example of one, and then I give it another JSON example, and then I give it another JSON example, and then I give it another JSON example, and then pretty much finally I tell it JSON has to be that's the JSON standard, ECMA 404 by the ECMA International Organization, which is the organization that deals with JSON. And use British English spellings because I'm British and our company's British. So that's how to get the result you want. Another thing that's handy is this whole vectorization and RAG can be applied to batches of documents, not just one document. So you can upload 20 or so or more, 30, 40, 50 PDFs and vectorize those as a whole and apply it the same way. That's really handy. So if you've got a task that involves reading through lots of separate PDFs, and it will scan, when you ask a question, it will scan for parts of the text of all your documents that closely match your question and do the same thing. It'll be just as quick as doing it on one document. We found that really useful for something called an environmental assessment, where in Britain, when you're doing a big project, a big build, you by law have to submit a document that explains the environmental impacts, both of the build, but also the usage later, and how you're going to address these. So during the build, it's going to be waste disposal, particularly what materials are you using, what are you doing if you just torn up a field, you've lost a whole load of grassland, what are you doing to replace that? Are you planting trees? And then during usage is how efficient is the building, how well insulated, does it have solar panels, all those kinds of things. This of course involves reading across dozens of documents where the information might be hidden, and that takes somebody days to read through. This does it again in just a few minutes. So this is the ESG report, the Environmental, Social and Corporate Governance report. And again, it just takes a couple of minutes, and it's probably not the way you'd want to submit the final report, but it just gives you a marvelous head start. They love it. It just takes literally 2 or 3 days of really tedious work and compresses it down to 2 minutes, and you've got a document that you can use as your starting point. Really handy. But again, getting back to Paddington Bear, you are responsible for the output. You are a human being. You are presenting it. You can't say, it's no excuse to say, oh, it was generated by AI, I'm really sorry, it's rubbish. You've got to take the final responsibility for the output. Just like my higher school work experience student, they've done a wonderful job, but you've really got to check the work. That's where the quotes with the page numbers come in really handily. So if it says there's planning permission and it says that's on page 32 of this document, you can go and check it. That might be a little bit tedious, but it's still a massive time saving over the days that you spent reading through it before. Just give you a little, this is a demo example. I didn't want the cursor of the live demo, so I did a screen recording. So this is just from scratch. This is our first version of the Moyer interface. I'm picking my paleoichthyologist predefined, and there's here's 7 questions I'm asking about the fossil fish. This is all the presets that I just explained. So here is, I'm going to upload several documents. This is web direct, by the way. So it's doing this interface. And it's scanning it. And this is where I use a speed ramp to go through, because I thought it'd be really boring watching me upload documents. One of the requests we're working on now is a nice web direct interface to upload several documents at once. So you just go and pick the whole folder and it will read them all in for you. But this is just this was the minimum viable product on first release. So here's a document that it hasn't seen before. So I upload it. This is why I slowed down for this. And I think we can see it says extracting page 1. So it's actually processing document. It's in the extracting text process. You can see extracting text page 2, and it's going on page 3. So it's reading through the pages and it's returning those texts, and we can then do the markup prior to sending it to be vectorized. Page 4, and it should be done. I think there's only a short one. Page 5. The user, of course, can go off and make themselves a cup of milky English tea, or in my case, I can drink a glass of wine because it's Friday evening here in the UK. Thank you very much. It's done. There we go, and it's sent off to be vectorized. So now you can ask it to take all those files, and it's reading through all the files together, and it's vectorizing all of those files together. And it should only take, it's very, very quick actually. No, it's done. That was really real time. That was what, 20, 30 seconds. So now I'm doing run, and it's asking these questions, these 7 questions. Thank you very much. It's asking all these 7 questions, and it's using all those documents to provide the answers. There we go, I did a bit of a speed ramp there. It took about a minute, I think, in the end, but you can see it asks the questions in batches. So it's doing questions 4 to 7, just so it doesn't hit the token limit. And there we go, we got our answers. Then, importantly for our company, was the cost, because there is a cost to doing all these AI stuff, and you can rapidly rack up costs. You can see here on the left, sorry, of $79 doing a test here. That was me testing and testing and testing and testing and testing. So we found a good way was actually ask OpenAI itself, how much did that run that just cost? And it returns you, and that's logged for the user. So I'll run back a little bit here because I think, yeah. So here's an example of the output. I will pause it here. So it's saying the question was, what morphological features are found in the skulls of this taxonomic group that we're looking at? It tells me that we're working on the rhizodontidae, and it gives you just a little short summary of what it is. And then it gives me a more detailed thing, and it has page quotes here, like on the page 26 of the Devonian rhizodont Psychop PDF. That's where you're finding these answers. So I can go back and check. And this is our rating system. People can rate it. The answer, is it really good or is it really bad or in the middle? And if they ask the question several different times, it will have a generation. It'll have sort of, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Every time you ask that question again, you do a run again. And you can flick through, and then you can tag one particular one as being your best answer. That's useful. Carry on here. If you have a question that wasn't very well answered and you want to redefine the question. So I think here I type, because just Carboniferous is the equivalent to the Mississippian and Pennsylvanian in the UK. So I also want to refine the question slightly, and I want to run it again, but I think I'm only going to run that one question, so you can just say, just run that one question again. And it obviously runs a bit quicker because you're not answering all 7 questions. I think I'll do a speed ramp again, just to get through that. I can't recall. Yeah, maybe there's a speed ramp. Whoosh. The answer's back. And when I redefine that question, oh, it's asking about the cost. So the last, it only took 13 cents, but I get a much more thorough answer. When I was more specific in my question, I get a very much more detailed answer out of it, which just gives me loads more information about the morphological features. And because I know this group of fossil fish very well, I know that I can confirm that the answers are pretty good. Actually, that's what I'd expect from somebody doing like their sophomore year or something of a degree. If they were asked to answer these questions as an assignment, that will be a pretty good answer. Because I've redefined the question, I can either update the existing template or I can save it as a new custom template and kind of fork it off for separate development. So that's my presentation. I would say when you saw about the news about people being laid off because of AI, I've got to say this was my strategy here. Was I really thought there's this big dragon has appeared, and I'm going to retire in about 10 or 12 years. God, I really want to keep my job for this next decade, and the best way I can do is I want to be the jockey on the back of the dragon, riding it. I don't want to be running away from it. So I really would encourage everyone to just play around with OpenAI, find a silly project they want to do and just say, right, I'm going to solve this using AI and just work through the problems. I originally came at this because I'm a doctor. My daughter's adopted, and I had some friends who'd also just adopted, and they were having a really hard time in the first week. And when I adopted my daughter, I did a little recorded voice memo every night on my phone, just to say what went on and how did it feel. So I had this kind of end up having this 4-year diary, and I thought it would really help my friends if I could look back and say, how did I feel in this first kind of few weeks of adoption? And I thought, well, I'll use OpenAI for that. And you could use Whisper, which is an AI trained thing to transcribe my voice memos. And then I used ChatGPT to summarize several days worth into a thing. And I thought, well, I'll use Python as my tool to do it all. And I kind of forced myself to use AI to solve this problem. And it was great. It summarized it. Of course, by the time I'd actually finished it all, my adoption friends were now months into their their adoption and were absolutely doing well and were really settled. So it wasn't much use, but it did really break the fear of using OpenAI and doing all these settings and playing around with stuff. Okay, how to train your dragon, brilliant. Yes, and be the windshield. So any questions, I guess? I don't know who moderates the questions. Is it Chris, or do we just jump in and ask?
No, I mean, it's open outcry here. So if people have something, just, raise your hand if someone's already talking, but otherwise just let fly.
I have another question. It's a wonderful, wonderful case study. I love a good case study. What have you done any return on investment metrics at your company with the whole project and
Not yet, actually. My big boss, there's my sort of IT boss, and there's the big boss above him is really keen on it. We actually had a meeting yesterday when we were reviewing, but it's still such early stages. We built in a little thing here which just tracks obviously user logons, but also user actions. So when they're doing a run, just so that we can start to assess who's using it, how often are they using it. So that's really going to be the start of doing, because I'm sure it's going to come up, is this worth it? It's a little bit different being an internal developer because it's like an internal budget. You're not having to build clients or anything. So the money is a bit different. The budget is really how much of my time is being used up. So how many hours are being distracted, and also what does my boss really want? is the ultimate budgetary concern.
Have you surveyed your users at all as they use this tool to say, how long would this task usually take you, without AI?
Yes, we have one. Oh, I think I do have a next slide. Do I have a next slide? Oh, this somewhere. Yeah, here. That's it. So this chap here it was Nick. So he was an intern at Maslow, and he was there, and he worked on the very early stages of Moyer. We've now completed his intern. We've had him back as a full-time employee because he's really, really good. And he's the guy who's leading the practical user-based interaction and implementation of Moyer. So at the moment, we haven't got stats on it, but it's all sort of qualitative. It's not a very big company. There's only maybe, I think, 60 or so employees. So we're not, and they're not very, and they're all in the same office. So you know, he's getting feedback all the time about what's useful, what users want. So in the meeting yesterday, he had a whole list. I filled a Monday board with user requests of what would make it more easy to use. The Moyer was also developed alongside a Slack integration. So Moyer also exists on Slack, where you can build a Slack channel and invite Moyer into the Slack channel, and Moyer will summarize documents on the fly for you and digest things for you on the fly. So that's the other arm of it. So we're really trying to be user-led here. And the nice thing was this came top down, that the big boss was seeing people complaining about how much time they're wasting on this. So hopefully we'll be able to get some stats in future, but at the moment it's just sort of anecdotal that people seem happy to use it. The nice thing about this really occurred to me is you've had digital natives, as we use the phrase to say people who've grown up with mobile phones and the internet. And he's our first AI native that basically since leaving college, he's only worked in AI. And his job is in AI and it's working in AI, and that's all he's done, all he's ever known. It's interesting to see this generation come up where AI is just a thing, it's just there. So maybe the job losses will be there, but then there will also be people coming up and just seeing new ways of using AI, and new ways of implementing AI, and new businesses and new employees that require AI interacting with AI. So hopefully the future is brighter than the doomsayers, I'm hoping. Anybody else? Or are we all done, or have I frozen?
I think.
Yeah, I guess that's it.
All right, thank you.
A pleasure.
Great job. Thanks for that. Such a great use case. I love how you sort of have ad hoc AI assistants just available to people. It's like, hey, you need a insurance adjuster or whatever it is, and they can just cook one up.
Or a paleontologist.
Or that.
Yeah, everybody has a need. Okay.
Everyone has a need.
Well, if there are no other questions, I guess we'll let you get back to your
Friday evening
fry up and your
Friday,
guitar
yes,
playing.
I hope you enjoy your Friday evenings and keep safe over the weekend.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, I think we can call it a meetup. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Good meeting y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris, Lynn. The rest of the board.
Take it easy.
Yep.